A man falls from a 13th floor window in New York City. The government says suicide. His family finds evidence of blunt force trauma to the skull. 9 days earlier, he'd been secretly dosed with LSD by his own government. His name was Frank Olson, and his death wasn't an isolated incident. What you're about to hear isn't conspiracy theory. Every experiment I'm going to describe is documented in government archives and court records. These weren't the actions of rogue scientists. These were approved, funded, signed off on. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study, 1932, Macon County, Alabama. The U.S. Public Health Service recruits 399 black sharecroppers for a medical study. These men already have syphilis, but they're never told that. Instead, they're told they're being treated for bad blood, a local term for various ailments. In exchange, they get free meals, burial insurance, and medical care. They think they're getting help. They're not. By 1947, 15 years in, penicillin becomes the standard cure for syphilis. Cheap, effective, widely available. The men in the study are never given it. Researchers actively prevent them from receiving treatment anywhere else. They contact draft boards during World War II to exclude enrolled men from military treatment programs. The study continues for 40 years. It only stops in 1972 when whistleblower Peter Buxton leaks the story to a journalist. By then, 28 men have died directly from syphilis, 100 more from complications, 40 wives infected, 19 children born with congenital syphilis. President Clinton apologized in 1997, 65 years after it began. But while America was condemning Tuskegee, declassified files revealed something even darker on the other side of the world. Unit 731. Between 1937 and 1945, the Imperial Japanese Army ran a covert research facility in occupied Manchuria, Unit 731. What happened inside remains one of the most documented cases of state-sanctioned medical torture in history. Commanded by General Shiro Ishii, the facility housed up to 3,000 prisoners at a time. They weren't called prisoners. They were called logs, objects, not people. Prisoners were deliberately infected with plague, cholera, and anthrax to study disease progression. Some had limbs surgically removed and reattached to opposite sides of their bodies. Others endured frostbite experiments, limbs frozen, thawed, frozen again. Some were placed in pressure chambers until their eyes hemorrhaged. Vivisections were performed without anesthesia. The reason? Anesthesia might contaminate tissue samples. Between 3,000 and 12,000 people died inside Unit 731. Here's what makes this relevant to Western governments. After Japan's surrender, General Douglas MacArthur secretly granted the lead scientists full immunity from war crimes prosecution in exchange for their research data. The U.S. government decided the information was worth more than justice. None of Unit 731's scientists were tried. Several had prominent careers in Japanese medicine afterward. And that same logic was being applied by America at exactly the same time. The Guatemala syphilis experiments between 1946 and 1948, while the world condemned Nazi medical experiments, U.S. doctors were conducting their own. In Guatemala, American researchers deliberately infected over 1,300 prisoners, soldiers, and psychiatric patients with syphilis and gonorrhea, without their knowledge, without consent. The lead researcher, Dr. John Cutler, the same man who would later oversee parts of the Tuskegee Study. They paid infected sex workers to have intercourse with prisoners. When that didn't work efficiently enough, doctors applied bacteria directly to open cuts on subjects' arms, faces, and genitals. Sometimes they injected infectious material into the spine. At least 83 people died. Researchers insisted the deaths were unrelated. The experiments were kept completely secret, even from the U.S. government. They weren't discovered until 2010, when a historian found Dr. Cutler's archived papers. President Obama personally apologized. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton called the experiments clearly unethical. No American official was ever charged. And just a few years later, the U.S. military turned its attention to its own citizens. Operation Sea Spray, September 1950. San Francisco. For 6 days, a U.S. Navy vessel sprays massive quantities of bacteria into the air from giant hoses. They're testing how a biological weapon attack might spread through a major city. The military considers the bacteria harmless. They're wrong. Within days, 11 patients arrive at Stanford Hospital with rare infections. One, a retired pipe fitter named Edward Nevin, dies from a heart valve infection. His family sues. A judge rules in the government's favor, citing national security. This wasn't a one-time thing. Similar tests were conducted across the U.S. throughout the 1950s and 60s. In 1966, the Pentagon released bacteria into the New York City subway to simulate a nerve agent attack millions of commuters passed through with no idea. These experiments remained classified for decades. The full scope has never been disclosed, but at least those had a military justification, however twisted. The next one had no justification at all. Willowbrook State School, Staten Island, a state institution for children with intellectual disabilities. Between 1956 and 1970, researchers from New York University deliberately infected newly admitted children with hepatitis. The children were between 3 and 11 years old. Here's how they got parental consent. Willowbrook was severely overcrowded with years-long waiting lists. Parents desperate for care were told enrollment in the hepatitis study was the only way to secure a place for their child. That's not consent, that's coercion. The lead researcher, Dr. Saul Krugman, defended it for his entire career. His argument? Hepatitis was already widespread at Willowbrook. The children would have been exposed anyway. Senator Robert Kennedy visited in 1965 and said conditions were less comfortable and cheerful than the cages we put animals in at the zoo. The research did contribute to the hepatitis B vaccine. Dr. Krugman received awards. That's never resolved the ethical debate about how the data was obtained. But the most invasive experiments weren't in hospitals. They were happening in the shadows of the intelligence community. Project McUltra, April 1953. CIA Director Allen Dulles authorizes a program called McUltra. The goal: develop mind control techniques for use against Soviet operatives. The program ran for at least 20 years across 80 institutions, universities, hospitals, prisons. Many had no idea they were working for the CIA. The most well-known experiments involved LSD. CIA operatives dosed unwitting subjects, mental patients, prisoners, addicts, sex workers, then observed them without consent. One operation, Midnight Climax, set up safe houses where CIA hired prostitutes lured men inside to be secretly dosed while agents watched from behind two-way mirrors. Remember Frank Olson from the opening? November 1953. Olson, an army biochemist working with the CIA, was dosed with LSD without his knowledge. 9 days later, he fell from a 13th floor hotel window. Official ruling: suicide. His family fought for decades. In 1994, his body was exhumed. The autopsy found evidence of a blow to the head before the fall. No charges were filed. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all MK Ultra files destroyed. Most were shredded, but 20,000 documents survived a filing error and were discovered in 1977. The full scope has never been established. Most of the evidence no longer exists. 6 experiments, multiple decades, different agencies, different countries, but they all share something. They were approved, signed off on, funded. These aren't historical anomalies. They're not rogue scientists. The Tuskegee Study ran for 40 years. Hundreds of people knew. MK Ultra involved 80 institutions. Unit 731 required an entire military command structure, and we only know about these because of accidents. A whistleblower who wouldn't stay quiet. Misfiled documents. A lawsuit that forced declassification. The question isn't whether governments are capable of this. The evidence is overwhelming. The question is, what are they approving right now that we won't find out about for another 50 years?